Okay, so I just got done watching Stranger Things, and I gotta be totally honest with you guys. Stranger Things, it was really hyped up to me, and you know when something gets so hyped up that the show itself can't possibly be good enough to meet those expectations? Stranger Things is not that show. Stranger Things is that show that gets super hyped up for you and then it exceeds those expectations because holy cow, this is one of my favorite TV series of all time. I am not exaggerating on that. This show blew me away. Hi there everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and this is the post-Geekout reaction for Stranger Things. Now for anybody who is new to this channel and you're wondering what's the post-Geekout reaction, it's not a review. And I cannot stress that enough because in the reviews, I sit down and I think of everything that I want to say and I make sure that it's all written out nice and clean. I make a script for it and I also make sure not to put in any spoilers. The post-Geekout reaction is just an open and honest discussion about how I felt after watching this thing. And I have a lot of feelings after watching this thing. So yeah, in the post-Geekout reactions, it's just me rambling. It's just me BSing. It's completely uncensored, and that means I don't care about spoilers. This is just for the people who have watched Stranger Things and want to hear how I felt about it. So if you have not watched Stranger Things and you do not want to be spoiled on anything, click off this video now, come back later in the week when I have the official review. But for everybody who has seen the show and you are fine with spoilers, oh my god, that show was so damn good. This isn't, I put this joke in the review, so if you've already seen the review, forgive me for repeating myself, but it's the truth. This is not my favorite TV show of 2016. This is my favorite thing of 2016. This is true. I kid you not. I started watching the first episode at midnight a few days ago because I was like, yeah, you know what, it's time I finally check this thing out. I'll just watch one, maybe 2 episodes, then go to bed because I got work in the morning. I watched 6 episodes of that. I was up until 7 o'clock in the morning, had to be at work in 5 hours. I didn't care. Did not regret my decision one way or another, and I wasn't sleepy at all at work because just thinking about this show kept me fully charged. Just that idea of I have to get through the workday so I can get home and watch those final 2 episodes, that kept me going. That kept me awake. Oh man. Okay. When you start watching this show, it's very clear that it's trying to pay homage to all of those 80s movies, you know, like the Steven Spielberg films. It's totally supposed to have like that E.T. sense to it, or that Goonies sense to it. You know, that feeling of the little kids out there and there's something strange going on. They gotta solve the case. And I've seen so many things that have tried to rip that off or pay homage to it or parody it or basically try and reproduce it in one way, shape, or form. And this is the only one I've ever seen that didn't just put in there the ingredients, they also put in there the feeling of it. And that's the thing that so many of these homages or replicas have been missing. It's that feeling of those old movies. It's that when you're watching this, you don't get that sense that someone is trying to pay homage. You get the sense that, no, you just discovered a hidden gem from back in those ages. Like, this is the one that Steven Spielberg made, but I looked at it and went, oh man, this would mess too many people up. I gotta put that in the vault that no one can ever see. Because when you watch this, it doesn't just have the kids going out there to save the day. You actually get that feeling that you got when you were a kid and you were watching these films of it doesn't matter if the entire government has some weird secret base up there that's heavily guarded and they've got demons from other dimensions coming in. We're 3 kids with bicycles. That means we can save the day and stop anything. It's that feeling that you got when you were a kid just riding your bike and feeling the wind on your face that you're untouchable. But also like just how it portrayed the school. Like, that's exactly what it was like back in the 80s in those films. And in fact, it was even a little bit more real in this than it was back in the 80s, because back in the 80s, in those movies, you would get the bully, but the bully never went as far in those films as they went in real life. But when it got to that moment that the bully, like, was about to go and beat up the protagonist, I was like, oh god, this is gonna be an ass kicking. This is gonna be like a real world ass kicking. Like, it gave you that feeling of like real world bullies, especially when he pulled the knife out. I went to public schools down in the South around this time, I had a couple weapons pulled on me. So yeah, it's like, alright, this feels real. This feels like I've gained a genuine fright coming from this. It's not like some fictional thing. This is bringing back those memories of what it was like to actually be a kid. And speaking of the kids, this is hands down the best collection of kid actors I've ever seen. I always try to be nice to kid actors because I'm like, you know what, you're still new to this. You haven't really had the life experiences to be able to build yourself up as a great actor. These kids were damn good. Every single one of these kid actors, you got that feeling like they knew each other, like they were actual friends. You got the feeling like they were actually going through this. They did not feel like actors. They did not feel like kids who were being given these lines to read. They felt like those characters. I especially loved Lucas and, I keep forgetting his name, I just kept calling him Toothless. I've got him down here on IMDb. Lucas and Dustin. Okay, I love those two kids because they made, in all those 80s films, the protagonist was just kind of the bland guy who you were supposed to serve as like an instrument for the audience, the avatar for the audience, and you always end up liking their friends more because their friends actually had more personality. Seeing those two kids interact, they played off each other so incredibly well. Like, I love that scene in the final episode where they're just asleep on each other at the hospital. I was like, that sums up these two guys completely. Man. But beyond that, I love the adults in this. The only one who I heard people really complain about was Winona Ryder because they said, yeah, she does nothing but just scream and cry throughout 8 episodes. Which is true, but at the same time, her kid went missing in an alternate dimension with demons. I can understand her acting that way, and yeah, there was a line here or there in which I heard Winona Ryder say, then I was like, I don't know, that didn't really work that well. But the other, like, 95% of the time, I was like, yeah, this sounds like a mother who is trying to find her child. Like, I totally bought it. And the chief of police, again, another guy whose name I kept constantly forgetting. In fact, I've seen this guy thousands of times, I always forget him. David Harbour. That guy, I love that when he was first introduced. He just seemed like, you know, that kind of incompetent cop who was another staple of all these 80s films. And you got that feeling like, yeah, he just doesn't really care. He's just gonna kind of like, you know, go his way through this. He's probably gonna die off halfway through this series. He had probably the best character arc out of any character in this. My only real complaint about his character, and honestly, it's my only complaint with the entire show, is that you got brief peeks at his personal life and at his history, and you got those brief like mentions about he used to have a kid, he used to be married, but he didn't know anything. And then when you find out what happened to his daughter, I thought that was a great side to his character. It was a great thing to have happen to him to really flesh out his character. However, they put it all in that last episode. That, to me, would have had a bigger impact if you had done it like an episode or two before it, because the last episode is the hunt for Will. The last episode is them going out there to try and save the day. It's facing off with the demon. There's so much stuff going on there. I don't need you to give me all of this character's backstory in that episode 2. This episode is wrapping everything up. I felt like you should have introduced that in an episode or 2 earlier, and then that could have been another thing that got wrapped up. Don't get me wrong, when he was bringing Will back to life by giving him CPR and like the way he's beating on his chest is matching up with the heartbeats on the machine, I thought that was amazing editing. By the way, editing in this thing is damn good. It's rare in a show or in a movie that you notice good editing. Bad editing sticks out like a sore thumb, but good editing, rarely you notice. You actually notice how good the editing is in this show. I think that's one of the biggest compliments I can give this show, is that something that you would regularly never ever notice, you notice, because it's that good. But I thought that was great editing, and I thought that, God, sorry folks, this whole show is totally unprofessional. But you know it's unprofessional. I'm sitting here on the thinking couch. You knew what you were getting into. You weren't professional when you come back for the review. But yeah, I thought that was a good thing to have in the final episode, but everything else I felt like you could have put in an earlier episode. In fact, I don't even feel like you really needed that cutting back and forth, because if you had had that in the previous episode too, let's be honest, most people are watching this all in one sitting, they would have probably gotten it. Also, before I fully move away from all the actors, and especially the kid actors, I thought that the girl who played Eleven was really good. That was a very hard character to play, because it was very little dialogue and just a lot of like discovering the world, which, you know, that's really hard for anyone to portray, but I actually thought that she did a pretty good job with it, especially when she started to become more of a badass with her powers and she actually started to use them. I thought that she was able to portray that really well. And speaking of the way that she uses her powers, I mentioned that this show captures a lot of the things that we loved about those 80s films, but wasn't just putting them up there on the screen, it was actually making you feel that way that you felt during those 80s films as well. Another thing that I absolutely loved about this is when they finally had the showdown with all the secret agents. I love that they did one thing in here that they never did in any of those 80s films, because in so many 80s films, especially ones that starred kids, there were weird, mysterious government agents out there, because that was a thing that a lot of people were getting concerned about back in the 80s, is that, oh, the government might be up to weird, crazy stuff, and that had to do a lot with people still recovering from like Watergate and realizing, oh man, the government is actually doing stuff that we didn't know about. But also had a lot to do with Reagan coming into office, and he was doing suddenly a bunch of backdoor stuff that people were finding out about. It's like, oh geez, maybe our government is up to stuff that we didn't know about before. But also had a lot to do with just being a kid. And when you're a kid, anybody in really a position of power that you don't understand what they do seems kind of threatening. So that's why there were a lot of government operatives in those old 80s films who were meant to be the antagonists. And you always looked at them like, man, they are just so evil. They're doing really horrible stuff, but you can't stop them. There's no way to stop these guys. They're just a bunch of kids. Best we can do is just run away from them. Best we can do is just get to safety or, you know, achieve our goal in the end before they can stop us. But you always wanted to see someone just come in there and just go, no, stop them, take them all out. When she just, this is going to be such a weird statement, and I don't want anyone to take this out of context. When she just killed all of them in one shot, that should have been a horrifying moment because this little child just killed a bunch of people with her mind. But as I said, when you were a kid watching those 80s films, you wanted somebody to just stop those evil operatives. You wanted someone to just put an end to those evil agents and save the day. That was kind of a stand up and cheer moment for me. When you grew up as a kid watching all these films with villains like that and no one could ever stop those villains, you wanted someone to come in and stop those villains. So when she came in and stopped those villains, I was like, oh damn, someone actually did it. That's the thing that shocked me the most, is that they did the thing in here that no one had ever done, but everybody kind of wanted to see happen in those old 80s films. Man, this TV show, I keep wanting to say film, like it's an 8-hour long movie. This TV show just got it. It just understood what it was doing. This was not some ripoff of those old 80s properties. It's not some inferior version of it. It understood what made them great. It understood how to capture that feeling and actually understood how to put in there a bunch of stuff that we wanted to see in those old 80s films. And another thing that's an example of that is the monster. Spoilers for Super 8. But you remember when Super 8 came out and they were trying to do that same thing? They were trying to capture that same mood and same spirit. I'm not going to go into exactly how well I feel it accomplished that. However, one thing that bugged the crap out of me in Super 8 is that you've got this monster going around and it flat out murders people. It eats people. It's destroying the town. You spent 2 hours being terrified of this monster, and then when they finally run into it, they realize through like some psychic mind link that, oh no, it was actually the victim the whole time. Those evil government operative guys, they were keeping it kidnapped. It just wanted to go home. Oh, it only ate those people because it was hungry and it had no other option. We should feel bad for this giant monster that we've been afraid of for the past 2 hours. I get what they were trying to do, but I'm sorry. You tell me to be afraid of something for that freaking long, and I've actually seen it murder people throughout the course of this film. I'm not going to be won over by it being nice and friendly, and I was so worried that the Demogorgon in this thing, it was going to turn out, I was like, no guys, it just wanted to protect this little kid by dragging him into this alternate dimension. It thought it was doing a good thing. It's actually a friendly demon. No, this thing is a monster. It's a flat out, like, Lovecraft style monster. In fact, I kept looking at this thing throughout the entire thing. Whenever you just saw like the silhouettes of it or it trying to break into our dimension, I kept looking at it like, okay, it's scary, but let's hype this thing up so much. no way is it going to be as scary when I actually see it as it should be. And don't get me wrong, it's not really a creative monster, it's just got this giant mouth for a face, but it worked. It worked, man. Like, looking at that, I was like, this is some Lovecraftian stuff, and when you're dealing with some alternate dimension shit, yeah, that's kind of the direction you should go with this monster. So yeah, I thought that they designed it pretty well, I thought they built it up well, and I was so glad they had it be a freaking monster. They did not try and go, it's a friendly monster and it's just misunderstood. This thing has been murdering people and we have been scared out of our mind for 7 episodes now. Don't turn all around in the last one. And speaking of it being only 8 episodes, I kept thinking 8 episodes is kind of weird. Like, that doesn't feel like enough time for me to really grow and get attached to these guys and really bond with them. I was totally wrong. That was the perfect number of episodes. They knew how long their story needed to be, and they told it in that exact number of episodes. Kudos to them. This series has amazing pacing. In fact, I wouldn't have minded if this thing was shorter because it raised the tension so damn high in this show that by episode 4 I was like, dude, I don't care if you just resolve everything now, just get Will out of this freaking alternate dimension. Like, when it got to that point where she was like looking through that hole in her wall and she could see him on the other side screaming to get out, I was like, just end the show now. Just have her reach in, grab the kid, pull it out, the hole sucks up, and we never see that monster ever again because God, I wanted to see this kid get saved. And the kid doesn't even really have a personality other than the fact that you want to see it saved. But they set that up and you see the impact that this kid has on everyone else, and you care about everyone else who cares about that kid, that through these characters who you do care about, you care for that kid just as much as they do. So yeah, you didn't need to give this kid any kind of personality. You didn't need to care about this kid or find out, where this kid went to school and what his favorite class was and who his favorite teacher was. No, you just needed to know these other people who I do know, they want to save him, so I want to save him. They set that up great. Speaking of the teacher, by the way, I gotta say, their science teacher, everybody needs a science teacher like that. Someone who is really into science, doesn't just follow the textbook. No, this guy knows his stuff, and even if these kids are calling him up in the middle of the night while he has a date over, if they want to learn some science, he's gonna teach them some science. I love that teacher. That was another thing from those 80s films. Like, kids constantly were like, oh, my parents just don't understand. But there was always that one nice teacher, and they did understand. I always kind of love that about those 80s films, is that it teaches the kids, have like a healthy distrust of authority, but realize there's someone else out there. Someone out there in a position of authority, they're gonna be nice to you, and they're actually there trying to help you. And it's typically a teacher, so in a weird way, those 80s films were like, you know what? Stay in school, make sure that you study. I just kind of realized that. Those 80s films were actually trying to keep you in school. But that was another thing about films in the 80s. I don't know what it was about our society back then that was kind of causing this to pop up in films, but a lot of those 80s films, they were very pro-science. I don't mean like huge super science, but a lot of like, hey man, here's what you could actually learn in a book. Here's how you could actually apply that on this crazy adventures that these characters are having. So that was another part of those 80s films that a lot of people end up forgetting that this TV series actually did capture. And also, I just have to applaud this show on the way that it used horror. It knew how to build the tension in every single moment that it wanted to freak you out. If you guys have watched this channel, then you know that I am a bit of a horror movie junkie. I do really enjoy horror films. But I've never really been freaked out by horror TV shows. American Horror Story has scared me here and there throughout its run, but that's pretty much it. This is the first TV show that has really chilled me to my core the way that horror movies have. That moment where she's got all the lights strung up. By the way, that was actually really smart of her. I had to give her that. I was trying to figure out how on earth can you actually communicate when all you can do is yes and no's. That was smart. Dangling the lights up there with the letters written up there, that was really genius of her. But when it comes back and just says, "Are you in?" I just sat there going, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I was covering every part of my face. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then it starts crawling through the wall. Oh, geez. And we never really find out what the heck that creature is, and I love that. I love that this did not explain too much, because when you over-explain the thing that you're supposed to be afraid of, it's not that scary anymore. Like, the scariest film I've seen in the last decade probably was It Follows, mostly because you have no idea what the heck that thing is. And I love that after I saw that film, I talked to everybody at work who had also seen it, and we just spent like the entire day just coming up with theories about that thing. This show is gonna do the same thing. I love that this show gave you just enough information about it that you can kind of go, okay, I understand what it is. I'm not sitting here lost the entire time, but when it comes to the finite details, when it comes to the science of this creature, when it comes to what it really is and where it came from, that's something that can be discussed. And I think that that is an amazing thing for a show to be able to accomplish, because that's going to keep people coming back. When you can get people to basically keep talking amongst themselves about what the heck it meant, that's what made Lost such a big success. It's, you know, we love the characters on that show, but it was the mystery of it that kept us coming back. This is a show that gave us enough information that even if the mystery turns out to be a flop, we're not going to be disappointed because we already got all the entertainment we need out of the show. However, that little mystery that's left there of what is this thing? What is this other world? Where did it come from? What caused it to come into existence? That's something that will keep us discussing this show and keep it alive in our minds, but also it adds to the world. It's something that keeps us as the audience from looking at the show like, oh, this is just a regular town, but you know, some weird science experiment thing happened, so that's that. No, it keeps us looking at this town like something is different about this place. And if this is a series that wants to keep coming back, especially if it wants to keep coming back and revisiting these same characters and introducing new stuff, that will allow us to buy into it. It's kind of like what made Gravity Falls so great, is that this town has something off about it. By the way, this show basically is Gravity Falls for adults. That's what this show was. However, I don't know if that's what they do want to happen in this series. I thought that this series was just going to be like an anthology, and every single season was going to follow different people in different towns, you know, maybe even a different time period, telling different stories. None of them really connected, maybe like a little reference to one of the seasons in another season, but I didn't think they were going to be connected at all. However, the way that it ends left so many questions that I kind of feel like we do need to return. If we don't return, then the questions are still great, because as I said, it keeps us talking. It keeps us going, what happens next? And there's something to be said for a show that lets the audience kind of craft the story from then on out amongst ourselves. Not like The Sopranos did, where it just cuts to black. No, but a show in which it's like, it gave you the story, it gave you the adventure, and then it leaves you with a little like, okay, what does that mean? So it'd be fine if it does change over. However, when you see the chief leave the Eggo waffle in just like that little box, I was like, why is he leaving? Like, the girl's gone. She faded away. And even if she didn't fade away, is she just existing like out here in the woods? Like, is she living on her own? I mean, he used to have a daughter. Maybe he should have adopted her and moved to a different town where this evil organization doesn't know that she exists. But then it kind of hit me as like, oh, maybe she faded into the other world. And if she did fade into the other world, how does he know that? Did they tell him that when they picked him up at the end? Like, I thought that they were just going to pick him up in that car and drive off with him and we'd never ever see him again. But the fact that he's back and he now knows that she exists in this other world, it does kind of imply that it's like, okay, they still have stories to tell. Especially when Will spits out that little slug and he like flickers back and forth between the dimensions. Oh my gosh, there is definitely still stories to be told with that guy. I would be shocked if they didn't just like skip ahead by like a decade in the next season, hire on new actors, and now this Will kid, he knows how to go back and forth between dimensions and there's some new story to be told there. I'm just spitballing ideas out there, but man, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about leaving questions and how it keeps these things alive in our hearts. Because if I had watched something that just fully wrapped up, I would be like, man, that was great. I love that. And I would remember it and think back to it fondly. But I'm going to just constantly be thinking over and over again in my mind, what happened next? If we do not revisit these characters, I will forever be revisiting them in my mind. But let me know in the comments down below. What do you think happened at the end of the season? And what do you want to see happen in the next season? If this show returns, do you want it to be anthology? Do you want to see brand new characters popping up? Or do you want to revisit these characters and if we revisit them, do you want it to just be like a few months later? Do you want it to be like, a couple of years later? Let me know all that in the comments down below. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can see the actual review. And also, if you ever want to get in touch with me and share your own thoughts on this show, then you can always contact me on Twitter and Tumblr at Professor Thorky. But thank you guys for watching this. Make sure that you come back next time. Bye.